Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Unstoppable podcast. I'm Diana Chen, your host, and I'm joined today by Matthew Gold, my co host, also CEO and founder of Unstoppable Domains, and our guest, Devin Finzer, co founder and CEO of OpenSea. Welcome, Devin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. To start us off, Devin, I'm just wondering, how did you get interested in crypto in the first place?
I got interested in crypto in 2017. I was working as an engineering manager at a company called Credit Karma in San Francisco. And there was just a ton of excitement and hype around cryptocurrencies. I'd followed the space peripherally earlier and, bought a little Bitcoin, that type of thing. But in 2017, it was really the talk of the town in San Francisco. And so like a lot of people, I kind of went down the crypto rabbit hole. At that time, you could actually go to physical meetups. So I went to some physical crypto meetups, met a lot of people, actually met Brad, another member of the Unstoppable Domains team, and just started learning as much as I possibly could. And eventually, I think once you get to a certain point, you kind of get to the point of no return, where you're like, okay, I need to, leave my job and start a company in this space. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but it's going to be something crypto related. And that was kind of the position I was in late 2017. And my co-founder Alex and I applied to Y Combinator with a idea in the space that eventually kind of morphed into what became OpenSea. So yeah, that's kind of my, maybe slightly cliche background in space.
That's awesome. So we're going to dive into the OpenSea stuff, Y Combinator, all of that good stuff. But just to backtrack a little bit, when you first got interested in crypto in 2017, other than going to all these meetups and meeting people in the space, what were some other ways that you learned about crypto?
Well, reading the white papers was a big one at that time, less of a thing these days. Joining a lot of Facebook and Telegram groups, kind of reaching out to different projects. I think I actually applied to a couple projects just as an engineer, and got to talk with like Nadav from Dharma. So that can be a really good way to, if you're, on the fence, or if you're sort of at a non-crypto company but are interested in getting in the crypto space, just going and applying and even, and, feeling out, what options are there to get deeper into the space. That was really a good avenue for me. And then also just kind of learning the fundamentals. So diving really deep into how Bitcoin works, how Ethereum works, and tinkering with Solidity and smart contracts was a big thing. So getting your hands dirty. Nowadays, there's more to kind of get your hands dirty with on the application side. So back then, like there wasn't actually a lot you could do with your crypto. You could kind of like buy it and sell it on an exchange, and some people transferred it to their MetaMask, but very few people actually did. Now you can transfer it to a crypto wallet. You can buy an unstoppable domain. You can go and sell it on OpenSea. You can swap your ETH to DAI on Uniswap. There's just so much you can do. So it's actually, I think, an easier time to get involved in the crypto space because there's more of a visceral feeling around the applications that exist.
You can also just check your crypto prices every morning, right? Like that's a
Right.
that's
But
a
you
core
could do that in
component.
2017 too.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's how most people get in. So one thing I wanted to actually ask you about is when you came in, you actually ended up in a non-financial use case for blockchain, which I actually think is quite innovative and extremely innovative back in 2017, and would like to know. You know, what kind of pointed you down that path versus others? Was it just fortuitous? I'm actually kind of curious how that origin happened.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd always been really excited about more just general consumer applications. My first job was at Pinterest, where I was on the growth team, and I was really fascinated by kind of the birth of Facebook and social and Twitter and just all of these interesting applications that people were using, and I was just never like super deep into the finance world, so I didn't have a ton of expertise there. And CryptoKitties was really the inspiration for a lot of people who were crypto curious, sort of saw the vision of Web3 beyond just sort of the financial use cases of crypto, but were uncertain about like what was actually something that you could go and build. And CryptoKitties, what was awesome about that project was they just went and they took the technology that existed, which was a little rough around the edges. It was hard to build Solidity contracts. It was hard to use MetaMask, but they did go and they launched this application, and they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and so it gave you this sense of like, these are the sorts of things you could build that aren't just around trading and finance. And then from there, like, what was interesting is right after CryptoKitties, all these people kind of who were looking at CryptoKitties had all these cool ideas. So one idea was, now you own your digital cat. Could you like create other sort of gameplay experiences on top of it? So someone built a kitty racing application where you could go and you could race your CryptoKitties. There was another one, actually one of our first engineers here at OpenSea built kitty hats, which was sort of the first layer 2 game on top of CryptoKitties, so you could accessorize your CryptoKitties with hats. So another thing that kind of sparked my interest was I'd actually never been a huge gamer. I did some gaming growing up, but I wasn't like deep in the gaming ecosystem. And I just thought like, I realized kind of naively how cool like games were for like, I kind of like got a rejuvenated interest in like these really fun applications that look kind of like games. So it was kind of a combination of factors, I would say.
So I'm going to so there was a lot there, so I'm going to unpack it and back it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know, a CryptoKitty is kind of a piece of art on the blockchain, and I'll let Devin here give us a better explanation here in a second. And when I was talking to him about non-financial use cases, everyone thinks crypto and blockchain, they just immediately think, buy Bitcoin, number go up. But there's actually this whole world of things that are happening on the blockchain that have nothing to do with that whatsoever. And the category here, and I think it's easier for users to think about this or for people out there listening, it's like art. Just imagine art being out there. And the very first implementation of like this digital art that got really popular was a game about cats called CryptoKitties, and you could essentially buy a cat on the blockchain. And the joke was that cats are everywhere on the internet. Now they've come to the blockchain, and this is the CryptoKitties thing that Devin was just talking about. And then the cool part is you had this piece of art that was a cat on the blockchain, and then you could have that cat, and you could take another cat, and you could cross the two cats together and make a third cat, right? And so you also had kind of like this like Pokemon type feel to it, and these are called NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and a lot of it you're seeing is like art on the blockchain. So we've gone from cats, Devin, at the very beginning, and now you're seeing hats for cats, race cars, like racing cats. What are some of the things that are like popping up, like maybe more recently, that you're excited about? Tell us what's going on in the space today, because that's like 3 years ago. Hard to imagine. And some of those cats are actually doing quite well today. Like the original cat, I've seen them on OpenSea itself.
Yeah, well, so one really interesting thing to point out is a lot of the, or a subset of the items that were popular 3 years ago are actually experiencing a renaissance today. So the first project actually to make what you described as a non-fungible token, or NFT, was something called CryptoPunks, which was a precursor to CryptoKitties. And CryptoPunks were the 10,000 sort of very, very simple representations of a punk. So there's like alien punks, there's like Afro-punk, but they're just these really simple pieces of art.
A play off of cyberpunks, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they were given out for free, 10,000 of them. And people held on to them, and they're still today on the blockchain. And what's crazy is that now they're selling for tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they've become really this digital antique. So what's interesting about these assets is they can actually accumulate value over time. And the longevity of them is often very different than what you'd see with like a traditional video game where, you buy the item, you play the game, and then when the game dies, it's no longer interesting. So that being said, of course, there were a lot of projects that came after CryptoKitties that did phase out. So there were like your crypto puppies of the world, your crypto llamas, that type of thing that, they were kind of knockoffs of CryptoKitties and, didn't end up kind of taking off. But in terms of what other things... Oh, did you have something, Matthew?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, it's like a digital baseball card, is how I explained it to my dad, except you don't have to worry about losing it at your parents' house. And now we're actually getting digital baseball cards, right? Like they have like digital NBA do they or soccer players or something? You probably know better than I do.
Mhm.
That's actually popping up.
Yeah, so recently, Dapper Labs, which is the company that created CryptoKitties, partnered with the NBA to release a product called NBA Top Shot, which is essentially digital trading cards on the blockchain. They're actually on a different blockchain than Ethereum, which is where most of the NFT action has happened so far. But yeah, you can, and there are a couple other kind of trading card companies as well. There's So Rare doing it for soccer. There's these sort of like Magic the Gathering type applications where you own this digital card that you play inside of a game. So really, a lot of the physical things that people love to collect are coming online as digital, and they're sort of absorbing the best of both worlds. They have the physical properties where you can't tamper with them after you create them, and you can trade them on with physical things. You can kind of do whatever you want with them. You could go and throw it in the trash. You could gift it to a friend. You could go and sell it on eBay. Whereas with digital stuff in the old world, you couldn't really do all of those things. You could have them inside of one specific context, but you couldn't go and trade them outside of that context. So these crypto assets, these NFTs, combine the best of both. They have the physical property of immutability, but then they have the digital property of being programmable and basically zero cost to produce and transfer. So a lot of it's basically the best of everything.
What? The best of everything. Easy sell. So, a couple of questions. I'm actually going to pass this back to Diana right now. So, the people trying to get into the space, Devin, this is kind of the pitch. Like, how do you sell? And I like for people to have something to do other than go buy cryptocurrency and then lose all their money trading it, which is what seems to be most people's rite of passage. So there's a lot of other things you guys could do out there. So, like Devin, if you were going to pitch Diana on, picking up a cheap NFT, something she could get for like $5 or $10 or something, and then playing around with it, like, how would you explain this like digital art, digital collectible NFT market to someone like Diana who has never done anything with it before? How would you get them hyped?
Sort of to
Yeah.
add on to that, Devin, I think a lot of people, when they think about crypto and blockchain, they think about either financial uses or gaming uses, right? And you said you didn't come from a financial background. That wasn't your first use case in the crypto world. And you weren't much of a gamer either until you discovered CryptoKitties. So if you're talking to somebody who's, not really super into the finance aspect of it and they're not into gaming, how would you explain all of this to them and pitch them on it, get them hyped?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it definitely does help if you're interested in gaming because you're sort of you're already very digitally native. You're used to buying digital assets, and it's not too much of a stretch to go and buy a blockchain-based game item. So if you're not interested in gaming, you're not interested in finance, I do think that there's a really compelling story around digital art that's really just at its infancy, but is definitely starting to evolve. So if you think about why do you buy a physical piece of art? You're not buying it for the raw materials of that piece, right? You're buying it because there's a story around the piece of art and you know that you have property rights over that piece of art, right? If you buy the original Mona Lisa, and not a regular consumer is not going to go and make that
Easy.
type of purchase, but if you buy the original, that's the only Mona Lisa out there, and you can take a screenshot of it. You could, take a photo of it. You could reprint it. You could get almost an exact replica, but it's not the original. And there's no sort of status, and there's no excitement around owning it if it's not the original. So that concept or that idea of digital property rights just hasn't existed in the digital world. And so if I wanted to say that I own this piece of digital art, how would I actually prove that? I could send it to you. I could send the JPEG to you, but then you could send it to 10 other friends, and it's unclear who is the original owner, where did this come from, is it the original or is it just a copy? That's what blockchain introduces. It's this ledger that anyone can read from. All sorts of different applications are pointing to the same exact source of truth. And so on the blockchain, you can have a piece of digital art and be the only owner of it and make it very clear that you're the original collector, and make it very clear who the original creator of that was. Now, it's still a little bit of a stretch, I think, right? Because it's like, okay, you own this digital thing, like where are you going to display it, right? Because with the physical piece of art, you typically hang it on a wall, put it in a museum, all of these things. And that's where I think a lot of the infrastructure is still being built out. But there's an emergence of both just simple websites for you to display your art and curate it, and then also things like virtual worlds where you can create an actual like VR museum of your art. And again, only if you are the actual owner of that piece can you display it inside of your virtual house, right? And the virtual worlds can respect that in different ways. So like there could be a virtual world where you can display something and you don't have to be the owner. There could be a virtual world where you do have to be the owner, but that ownership means something in these various contexts, and all the different applications are reading from the same thing. So it gets a little bit technical as you carry the story on, but
I love it. But yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I think Devin, like the overarching theme of what you just said is like ownership and control, how you can own all of these things. And that's something that drew me in when I first learned about this from Matt, is the whole concept of digital ownership. And so for me, like, I'm not an art collector, I'm not a gamer, none of that. So I'm not buying digital art or buying CryptoKitties or anything like that. But I am somebody who's, a content creator, and I've got followers, and I work with brands and products on Instagram and social media. And so I think this is super interesting for any content creator, influencer, anyone that has any sort of digital presence or digital, business or way of making money online, because if you can own all of these things, that means you're not at the liberty of Instagram or whatever company that you're using to get your products or your brand out there to potentially shut down your brand and your platform for, no reason other than you sign terms and conditions with them and you abide by their rules. So I think like the overarching theme of that ownership, I think has so many applications and so many use cases that can really be interesting to just about anybody out there, like not just people interested in finance or gaming or, digital art.
So how do I buy one for $5? I'm looking for my first NFT that, and I don't want to bet the house on it. You have any suggested maybe projects that are tailored to earlier users, or is the original CryptoKitty still a good spot to start if you just want to have one on your crypto wallet so that you can get your feet wet?
Yeah, if you want to just buy one NFT for like a very small amount, you can go to our marketplace, OpenSea, and sort by lowest price and just look for something really cheap. Now, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to like resell that. It could just be
we're talking about just doing this for fun.
Research, but you could then have an NFT. You can also, the other thing you can do nowadays is you can mint your own NFTs, right? So there's really nothing stopping you from going and we have a simple tool for this on our site where you can go and create what we call a collection. And what we've done actually that's interesting is we allow you to sort of mint this NFT without paying the usual fee you would pay on the Ethereum network, which is called a gas fee. And you can kind of create the NFT and then put it on sale, see if anyone wants it, without having to pay that fee. And then the buyer will actually pay that fee. So one of the kind of tricky things with the state of the Ethereum world at the moment, and one of the things that we're working on at OpenSea, is that things are rather expensive. So everything that you kind of do on the network costs a fee paid in Ether. And that can be a bit of a barrier to entry to someone who doesn't want to necessarily have to pay every time they're buying or pay every time they're moving something around. So those things are getting better. But yeah, for now, I think a good place to start is either buying something that's really cheap just to see what it's like, or creating your own.
Yeah. So side note there, the way that I like to explain scaling problems on the blockchain to my dad and my friends and family, it's like dial-up in the early 90s, and everyone remembers when they had like the 14K dial-up, and that thing was like super slow. So we're at like the 14K dial-up phase of the internet, and we're broadband is going to roll out slowly, right? And it's going to happen in some places first, and then it's going to happen in some other places. And it now that was a lot harder, and it took like 20 years before now everyone has fast internet at their house. But we have to do the same thing on the blockchain. It's going to be mostly software because we don't have to lay fiber down. So it won't take 25 years to do that, but it is going to take like 3 to 5 years to make blockchains faster. And so one of the criticisms that people level against blockchains and blockchain products and blockchain companies all the time, and I'm sure you get this at OpenSea just like we do it on Unstoppable Domains, they're like, how is any normal person ever going to use this thing? It's too slow, or like the transaction fees are too expensive. So for those people out there, I would just say it's a process, and technology has done this same thing before where something was very slow and had to be made faster. And like you've seen that with processors, with storage for memory, with bandwidth. So I agree with Devin that this is going to be solved. And it's just people are working on it right now. So we're actually seeing some things in the space, which I think is pretty cool. So Devin and I could jam out on scaling for like an hour and a half here, Diana. So we will save that for a future discussion. I want to make sure you got any other things you want to walk Devin through before we got moving here.
Yeah, I guess another thing, sort of on the same topic of challenges that we're facing in the crypto or blockchain world right now, what do you see as some of the major challenges that are preventing quote unquote normal people from getting into the crypto space?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so I think the analogy that Matthew made of dial-up internet is a perfect one. And I think the other thing to remember is when you started using the internet way back when, there was like all of this special stuff that you had to install on your computer to even just get on the internet. And we're in a similar stage in blockchain. There's all of this special stuff that you have to do, this black magic, as it were, to get started on something like OpenSea, right? So you have to get yourself a wallet. You got to get yourself cryptocurrency, which usually involves going to an exchange, or there's some things that make it a little bit easier, but traditionally it's been a bit of a process. And then you have to get your cryptocurrency into that wallet, and then oftentimes you'll have to submit a transaction, and maybe that transaction will not be priced high enough to get through to the blockchain. So there's all these things that can kind of go wrong as you're getting set up. What's pretty crazy though is that right now in the NFT space, especially with artists, they're really excited about like this stuff, and they're just going and doing it. So there are experiences that abstract all of this away from the user and like get them started earlier, and I think that's great for bringing in new users. But to experience kind of the real magic of the blockchain and kind of some of the interoperability benefits that you get when you have things in your own wallet, like something like MetaMask, you do have to kind of go through these hurdles. But people are excited enough about the promise of digital ownership that they are going through those hurdles, which is, I think, a really strong sign for the space going forward.
Let's give a shout out to some of those artists. Do you actually? I know 3Lau is one of them. So like that, there's someone pushing the boundaries for blockchain and digital art. So shout out to 3Lau there. Do you have any? I actually don't have a list in front of me. Do you have any you want? Let's shout some artists out here if you've got a few, Devin.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll shout out some ones that aren't as like famous as, I believe it's pronounced Blau, or so I've heard. So some folks who are sort of have been with the NFT space for a really long time, and are some of my favorite like crypto native artists. There's Josie, so she's an artist who does a lot of like crypto specific painting, both physical and digital paintings and digital art pieces. She's been selling work on OpenSea since maybe even 2018, I think, early 2018. And then another guy who we met with way back when CryptoKitties had taken off is a guy by the name of John Orion Young, who creates this very, very interesting, very cool VR art. And he does a lot of stuff. He kind of is sort of what you might call like a kind of independent artist, in that he doesn't go through some of the platforms for creating crypto art, like the Super Rare. So Super Rare is kind of a platform where you can mint art through their system. There's Maker's Place, there's Rarible, there's all of these different art platforms. He actually has deployed his own smart contracts and even written code to implement interesting pricing features into how people buy and sell his art. So he's really like pushing the boundaries of what can be done, and is always coming up with a lot of really interesting projects. But yeah, if you look at kind of the emerging crypto art space, there's just tons of people who are doing interesting things. And then I guess maybe the most famous recent one was Beeple, who's this digital artist who has been doing, I believe, a new digital art piece every day. And he sold a set of digital artworks on a site called Nifty Gateway, which is another of these art platforms, for, I think it was $3 million. And, it was just, suddenly he was able to really effectively monetize digital art that previously, wasn't really a big source of income for him.
Yeah, I would say that's one thing that crypto is really good at, is being able to take anything that you want to create on the blockchain and then plugging it in, because it's super composable. So like, I've seen lending against NFTs. I saw like a pretend indexed fund or something for NFTs, which I thought was pretty crazy. And then I saw like fractional ownership. And this is actually, I think, a pretty big company now is doing this for consumers. So you can buy like, 1/10,000th of a piece of Monet or something. And the thing that I tell people is like, this market, like all of these markets are going to multiply by, there going to be 1,000x more people participating in these things over the next decade, because there's only a couple 100,000 users actively interacting with these blockchains every day. So it's like, really, we are that early. And then 100% of all the complaints I get, they sound just like the complaints from like 1992. And I'm just like, it's the exact, like, I'm not going to fall for it. Like, I've seen how this plays out, so I'm not fooled. One other thing I want to point out to people who may not have known this, but you actually wrote the NFT Bible, which we will plug in the show notes here. And so, yeah, I'm not going to make you break that down because I think it's pretty long, but Devin is actually an expert here. So if you're actually looking to learn more about NFTs, I would point you to his NFT Bible. And I think that's a good place for you to go learn more about digital art. And I think that, read literally the NFT Bible yourself to get an idea of where this market is and where we could be going. Shameless plug.
Thank you.
I want to get into more of OpenSea and how you got the idea for that. So you said back in 2017, you first learned about crypto, you got really deep into crypto, and you knew that you had to, create something in the crypto space. So why OpenSea of all things that you could have created in the crypto space? Like, what inspired OpenSea?
Right. So, as I said, we were very interested in CryptoKitties, and we sort of joined a lot of the CryptoKitties communities. I remember I was like at some concert and just like constantly checking the CryptoKitties Reddit, because it was just, there's all this weird stuff going on, and I just thought it was fascinating. And what we saw was a lot of people in the gaming space and sort of the consumer tech space, crypto space, intersecting around this idea of a non-fungible token, which was pioneered by the CryptoKitties team, and starting to build new non-fungible tokens. So we kind of thought that a natural piece of infrastructure for that emerging ecosystem would be a place where you could buy and sell your non-fungible tokens. And so when we started, it was kind of almost a silly project, because all we had on our marketplace was CryptoKitties. So it was really just an eBay for this one specific thing, which was this one game where you could trade around these digital cats, and not at first, not a lot of people really used it, because CryptoKitties kind of had their own marketplace, and that was where most of the trading happened. But what was exciting was as new games came online, often in contrast to like a regular game where you kind of build every single piece of the game. You build, if there's a marketplace, you build the marketplace yourself. If there's gameplay, you build all the gameplay, and the assets just kind of live within the game. In contrast, these new games, they would like sell their assets, but people wouldn't have a place to resell them. So that was really exciting for us, because we saw these games coming online and we kind of scrambled to support them on our marketplace. And what was cool is that over time, at first, sometimes we'd have to do some heavy lifting to make sure that the game items showed up perfectly on our site. You know, like talk to the developers, see if their contract was implementing something wrong. But over time, uh, all of the smart contracts representing these items became more and more standardized. So now anyone can come along and have a digital asset, or an NFT, and use our marketplace to buy and sell without ever having to have a high touch experience with us. So yeah, that was kind of a natural evolution from seeing this sort of first use case around this one particular game, and then seeing other projects come online that needed a marketplace.
Got it. So can you give some more examples of some of the other assets that are on OpenSea now? You started with CryptoKitties. Now, obviously, there's way more than that. So what are some, how has OpenSea evolved over time? And then what are some of the most exciting assets that are being sold on OpenSea today?
Yeah, so today there's on OpenSea we break things down into 5 or 6 different categories, although there's probably more categories that you could come up with. The first is art. So art has really taken off, and we've talked a bit about this since CryptoKitties. And what's interesting about art is that it's really simple, right? You just upload a piece of digital art and then you put it on sale, and the value of that art is just kind of related to the provenance or the history and the creator of that particular piece of art. So it's a really simple, compelling use case, and it's almost a no-brainer for digital artists that want to be able to sell their work. The second, of course, is domain names. So this is where Unstoppable Domains comes into play. So these are crypto-powered domains that probably your viewers are already familiar with. But what's exciting is that you can trade them on OpenSea as well. So you actually own these domains on the blockchain. You can go and connect your wallet and then put a domain name on sale. And there's sort of this emerging early economy around people speculating or that are interested in making a transaction to buy a particular domain that they want to put their decentralized website on. The third category is virtual worlds. So virtual worlds are these game type experiences where inside of the game you own a piece of virtual land and you can build whatever you want on top of that land. So if anyone ever played Minecraft or maybe Second Life, those were these games where you could have a whole economy inside of the game, right? You could have clothing, you could have avatars, and there was exchange of these assets. And what's interesting about these new types of virtual worlds is that instead of it being confined to a specific game or a specific application, you can actually go and trade the land in that world or the stuff in that world on a third-party marketplace like OpenSea. And then probably the last category to talk about is sort of this like collectible trading card category of things. So here is, we've touched a little bit on the NBA Top Shot project from Dapper Labs. There's also Gods Unchained, which is another trading card game, so rare. But basically these are these collectibles that are sort of almost a hybrid between the art use case and the gaming use case, where they're collectible items. Some people collect them for the sake of collecting, but then other people collect them because they're using them inside of the game. So it's a really diverse ecosystem. What's crazy about non-fungible tokens is you can kind of represent whatever you want to represent with them, and so the design space is pretty much unlimited.
Yeah, that's super cool. So it sounds like the categories of users you have right now are pretty much gamers, collectors, and maybe crypto fans or people that are, more knowledgeable about the space. How do you see OpenSea evolving in the future? Like, what are some things that you see being sold on OpenSea in the future? And how long would you, if you had to guess, how long would you say it'll be until quote unquote normal people are on OpenSea, or just the masses are all using OpenSea?
Yeah, well, that's a good question around the masses. I guess what I think may evolve over the next while, we're already seeing sort of interesting signs of selling tokenized physical assets on OpenSea. So an example here is, let's say that actually we this is something that we have supported on OpenSea, is someone can tokenize a bottle of wine, they can have the custody of that bottle of wine, but the digital asset can be traded around many different times before it's redeemed for the actual physical thing. What's interesting about that is you can have this really vibrant, digitally native market for an asset that is tied ultimately to something physical. And so you could imagine that, maybe you decide to trade your rare sneakers on OpenSea because you can trade them around digitally before you actually ever need to take custody, and you could have a much more efficient marketplace there. So that gets into the territory of more traditional marketplaces today, like StockX and Goat, and that are kind of breaking off chunks of eBay. Now, I'm not sure how long it'll be until OpenSea gets into that territory. I think we found a really interesting niche with these very digitally native assets, and we're actually really excited about more and more regular people experiencing digital ownership, because it is a new phenomenon, but it's a pretty exciting one when you get deeper into it. So I mean, I think there's two possible worlds. One is that, maybe regular people won't be coming onto OpenSea until you can trade regular things. Or the other world is maybe regular people come onto OpenSea because they get excited about these new weird crypto things eventually. So I don't know. I think I could see a mixture of both of those happening, actually.
Yeah, wait, so I want to go back to the sneakers or the wine example real quick. So, okay, so what you're saying is basically if I have like a super rare bottle of wine that's worth a lot of money and I want to sell it, what I can do is turn that into a digital token and sort of sell that around or pass that around on OpenSea. Like I might post it on OpenSea and you see it and you're like, ooh, yeah, this bottle of wine is like really good and I want it. So you buy it for a certain amount, but then you try to sell that again. At what point does somebody else take ownership of my bottle of wine?
Right. So there's the current state of affairs, and then there's maybe future state of affairs. The current state of affairs is there was a company called Wiv that experimented with this, and they held the wine, but they turned it into tokens and they put it on sale. You could buy it, and you could do one of two things. You could either just hold the token and then resell the token for some other price, or you could redeem that token for the actual bottle of wine. Now, once you redeem that token and you have the rare bottle of wine, maybe you could set up a system where you can send it back and then tokenize it again. But at least in the simple version of this, it was kind of over at that point, right? But what's interesting is you could have these digital representations bought and sold many different times just for pure speculation purposes before it's actually redeemed for the physical asset. And looking in the future, you could start to think about more sophisticated ways of doing physical transactions through the blockchain. So I think there's a project called Erasure Bay that has this kind of concept where you will stake tokens. So you'll basically say like, okay, as long as I actually send you the physical asset, I'm sort of depositing this amount of capital, and if I don't actually send you it, then I will lose that. So there's sophisticated ways you can do physical trades. We're not really in that business at the moment. We're more interested in, once it's become digital and once you know that it represents a certain thing, can you trade it around digitally a lot of different times? But certainly I think maybe one day we could facilitate like peer-to-peer physical transfers as well.
Got it.
I think that's a pretty cool use case for like Kickstarters or like sneakers, basically anything you buy like pre-sale, right? Because then like if you bought a Kickstarter thing and then like a month later you're like, actually I don't want this. Now you're just kind of stuck, or you got to ask for a refund, but maybe you could resell the Kickstarter item. And then sneakers, I know people who are sneakerheads, and they like sit there with a bot and like they just try to buy that sneaker, and they can't always get it, on the day that the sneaker's released. But they would love to just be able to go on a secondary market and pick up a digital, essentially coupon to be able to redeem for that sneaker, whenever the sneaker is available. So, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So I guess like what is the market? Is OpenSea pretty unique in its space, or do you guys have competitors, and what are they doing? What are you guys doing differently from them?
Yeah, so over the last 6 months, the space has definitely sort of grown in size, and we do have folks that are either like doing roughly similar things that we're doing, or kind of tangentially related, or kind of in the similar markets. One note that I'll say is that the space is like, I would say, uniquely collaborative, probably even more so than kind of, if you look at the early internet as a good analogy for where crypto is today. I think the collaboration and sort of interconnectedness of all of the different applications that are working in the space is extremely high, because at the end of the day, the blockchain is a coordination layer. And so, for example, like pretty much all of the companies that we would potentially consider kind of our competitors will have shared chat channels with, will constantly be coordinating. We'll link to their site, they'll link to our site. They'll have assets that you can sell on OpenSea, we'll have assets that you can sell on their site. That all of these things are very connected. But I would say what distinguishes OpenSea from our competitors is we've always been very horizontally focused. So we've always allowed you to trade all sorts of different things on OpenSea. We haven't really as much focused on like a very specific vertical. Now we are doing some things recently in the creator and art space that are a little more tailored towards that market, but in general we've always tried to build tools that any project can use, whether it's a piece of art, a domain name, virtual world, and I think that has been a really exciting feature or a really exciting piece of the product for our users, is that they know they can go on to OpenSea and find what they're looking for. We aggregate prices across a bunch of different markets, so we're always trying to find the user the best deal for an asset, and I think that will become more and more important as the market expands.
That's awesome. Do you guys have anything exciting, new, cool planned for 2021?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we haven't officially announced but is in the works is we're expanding to other blockchains. So we'll be able to support chains in addition to Ethereum. And the reason that's exciting is that Ethereum right now is limited in its ability to cheaply process transactions. So if you want to buy and sell something on OpenSea, you typically have to pay a pretty large sum of money just to facilitate that. And so we think that other blockchains and other complementary scaling solutions to Ethereum that are coming out over the next 3 months, or maybe even have already hit the market, are really going to enable a new set of use cases for NFTs that aren't just these sort of high value, $100, $1,000, and then $10,000 assets that aren't necessarily as accessible to a more mainstream user. So that's a big focus for us. And then the other area that we're focusing on is we are making it easier for people to create brand new NFTs on OpenSea. So I mentioned before, we have a simple collection manager tool, which allows anyone to come onto OpenSea, upload whatever asset, whatever file, and immediately tokenize and turn it into a tradable, non-fungible token. So we're making investments in just making that process easier for creatives and people who want to experiment with the space.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, Devin, the next thing I want to do is I've got a fun little activity I like to play with all the guests, where I do a deep dive into your Twitter account, which you actually have a very interesting Twitter. You tweet about a lot of things and a lot of philosophical tweets that I've pulled up. But before we do that, Matt, do you have any other questions for Devin?
I'm ready for the explain your tweet game. I'm excited.
The Twitter
for
dive?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh my God.
All right, cool.
That's a
So
great idea.
I've done a deep dive in your Twitter. I'm just going to pull out some tweets. I'll read you the tweet. I'll tell you when it was posted, and then I'll give you a chance to sort of explain what you were talking about. All right?
Sure.
Okay, so on January 12th of this year, you tweeted, considering declaring Telegram DM bankruptcy. What's that all about?
Yeah. So, well, for those of you who don't know Telegram, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it, but it's a messenger app. And it's kind of like any messenger app, Facebook Messenger, Slack, these types of things. The thing, and yeah, I like Telegram, but there are certain things I do not like about it. And the biggest one is the way that they order your messages. So if anyone has a fix for this, let me know. I've looked, and I haven't looked recently, but last time I checked, there's not a good fix. If you have a new DM, it's really hard to find it because you have to scroll down to where there's this blue bubble that indicates that you have an unread message. So long story short, it just makes it really, really hard to find unread messages. And so this tweet was sort of like, okay, I might just give up on trying to respond to my Telegram messages. And the other thing is that's really annoying is when you mark a message as unread, it scrolls you back to the top. So you go down and you're like, okay, I'm going to look at this message. I don't want to respond. I'm going to mark it as unread. And then you start from the top again. So that was my frustration with that.
Got it. So if anyone's listening who works at Telegram or has control over any of that, go and fix your UX UI, or else Devin's getting off your platform.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, cool. Next tweet. This is from January 7th of this year. You tweeted, "Speak your mind and you'll say what you think. Speak from your soul and you'll say exactly what they need to hear." That is very philosophical.
Yeah, that was a thought that I think I had while I was meditating. But it's basically this idea that, oftentimes it's tempting to, when you're talking to someone, it's like, yeah, you want to generally be open and honest and, say roughly what you're thinking. Obviously there are circumstances where that doesn't make sense. But I think, that's being honest and transparent is one layer of excellence. But I think the layer above that is actually, is sort of feeling like what is the right thing to say in this circumstance, given, like what the situation and like your relationship with the other person. So often I think it can be tempting to like want to explain exactly your perspective and it's sort of a like ego reduction type thing. Like instead of trying to explain your exact perspective on something or like try to communicate everything about how you see something, you can kind of feel into, well, what is the thing that like this person needs to hear at this moment, even if they're not going to see everything the same way that I see things. What is the thing that they need to hear? And also, even if that doesn't like satisfy my craving for them to understand my perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like everybody listening needs to just pause this podcast right now and think on that before you continue.
Totally.
All right, the next tweet I personally love because patience is not one of my virtues, and I can admit that. But on December 31st, New Year's Eve, you tweeted, "Impatience can be a virtue."
Oh yeah. So, by the way, I'll say that none of my philosophical tweets ever get a lot of love relative to my NFT tweets. Whenever I tweet something about NFTs, like it's great, but these tweets like get like very, very little activity.
Well, I'm gonna go through and like all of them, and listeners, you should as well. I love these.
But yeah, I think I was thinking about. I also struggle with patience as well, and in fact, that tweet was like I think that in general, patience is a really strong virtue, and it's something that I would say I like err on the side of being too impatient. But I do think that like I think there's this I can't remember what book this was in, but I think this guy had a conversation with Peter Thiel, and one of the questions like Peter Thiel would ask was like, okay, what's your 10-year plan, right? What are you going to do in 10 years? And then the follow-up is like, okay, how would you do that in 6 months? And so this question of like, okay, are you planning way too far in advance and actually not thinking about how you could accelerate your roadmap for various things, and just constantly feeling like there's a balance, right? You don't want to constantly feel like there's this fuel on the fire You don't want to feel like you're rushing things. You do want to make long-term plans, but at the same time, you also want to be incredibly ambitious and have a sense of urgency around the things you want to accomplish. Otherwise, you'll just never accomplish them. So I think that tweet was sort of encapsulated the thought that there's two sides of that coin.
I like it. All right. Well, that's it, Devin. That wasn't too painful. Hopefully, I didn't go too far back into your Twitter history and pull tweets from years ago. But I do think you have very interesting tweets, and a lot of people in the space just tweet about crypto and Bitcoin and things like that. But you actually do have just general philosophical tweets that everybody can go and read and enjoy and think some deep thoughts on. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before you go, Devin, I really appreciate your time, but tell people where they can connect with you personally if they want to reach out to you, where they can learn more about OpenSea, and also point people in the direction of once they sign up for OpenSea, what are some of the first things that they can do, or just easy and exciting things that they can do initially on OpenSea?
Sure. So for me, you can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/dfinzer. For OpenSea, our our handle is OpenSea, and then our website is OpenSea.io. In terms of exciting things you can do when you first get started, you'll need a MetaMask or some crypto wallet to get started, so make sure you install that. It's not too much of a hassle, but it is your first, probably if you're brand new, it's probably your first entry point into the crypto space. And once you do that, you can create a collection for free today, and go and mint your own NFTs and start putting them on sale, that type of thing. And then you can also just kind of explore and see what is interesting. So if you go to our rankings page, you can get a sense of what are the top non-fungible tokens that are being traded across different categories. And you can kind of find projects that might be interesting to you. So some of the projects I mentioned here, obviously Unstoppable Domains, virtual world projects like CryptoVoxels and Decentraland are all really awesome projects that you can browse around on and learn about on OpenSea.
Well, yeah, Devin, thanks for coming here. And I just want to say to everyone listening out there, it's people like Devin who are impatient and they try to make things happen in 6 months that should take 10 years that are going to get blockchain into your hands sooner rather than later. So Devin, from us at Unstoppable and everybody in the community, thanks for the work that you do. And very exciting to keep following along with what you guys are building at OpenSea.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Devin. Thanks, listeners, for tuning in. Thanks, Matt, for being an awesome co-host. And we'll be back again soon with another episode of the Unstoppable Podcast.